warm weather, everyone has plans for out of doors. It's easy to have fun outside, and being safe is part of having fun anywhere.
You should not do this right now. That trail's no joke.
The bears have slept awful long. They're going to be extra hungry.
I'll be fine.
Safe habits mean more fun.
Be prepared for anything and everything. If you aren't ready for it, you're going to have more than your share of sore muscles, aching feet, and awkwardness.
Playing safe is a good habit to learn.
Not many chances for fresh water between here and the gorge.
We can take 12 home if you need a lift.
I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Next time, string a pack from some branches the bears can't get to it.
No one told me that.
All right, I think it's time to get started. Hey everyone, welcome to our session today. We are talking all things Create Responsibly and Recreate Responsibly. My name is Katie Bouet. I'm one of the founding members of the Recreate Responsibly Coalition, an outdoor advocate, budding author, and all around stoked person to talk about our responsibility we have to the planet and to each other. And I will start by letting our fellow panelists introduce themselves. Dusty, I'll pass it over to you first.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Dusty Vaughn. I'm the National Wilderness and Wild Scenic River Specialist for the USDA Forest Service based out of Washington, D.C. And I'll pass it over to Tom.
Hey there, I'm Tom Putnam. I am the director and producer of The Dark Divide, as well as some other documentaries about the great outdoors. And I am based in Oregon and California. And I'll pass it over to Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie Oberly. I'm a freelance photographer, cinematographer, and activist living on unceded Chumash territories in Ventura, California. And I'm just really honored to be here. Really want to just shout out Eric from the North Face for inviting me to be here. And we just premiered our short film, Walking Two Worlds, at Tribeca, so which the North Face supported. So thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Thanks, everybody. And I think before we started, you know, our group, we had a little bit of a group text going this morning, just talking about what's been going on and just kind of the state of the last 24 hours in this country. So if you see us feeling a little heavy, that's why. And, you know, we really appreciate everyone who showed up here right now. I think it's really important to acknowledge when things are hard and take space when we need it, but also to always be moving forward in action when we can. So really appreciate all of you that took some time out on this Saturday to be with us in community and in conversation. And we'll start today by going through a quick presentation on what Create Responsibly is, what we want to do, and why we think it's so important. And then we will dive into a panel conversation, and we really encourage you to use the Q&A section to ask us questions that we'll answer at the end of our panel. We really want to make this a conversation and super dynamic, so know that we're keeping an eye on the chat and keeping an eye on the Q&As, and we'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts and perspectives on all of this. So without further ado, we'll kick it off here. Dusty, or Tom actually, rather, taking the reins.
Hi there. So Create Responsibly was started by a group of creators, some of whom are on the call. We were all a part of the Recreate Responsibly Coalition and realized that as creators, we felt there was no real best practices or nowhere to go to find out how best to utilize our wild spaces when creating content. So the goal was to put together something that were simple, easy to follow directions that would not only maximize ethical use of our wild places, but also make creating content in those places simpler. Dusty?
Thanks, Tom. Yes, the Create Responsibly concept was born from Recreate Responsibly Coalition. But what is Recreate Responsibly, though? Across the recreation landscape, we face opportunity and challenge. Our public lands are and wild spaces are being loved like never before, and that attention is unlocking resources and support for the places we love to play. Our climate is changing more quickly than we can comprehend, and the need to act is urgent. It is our shared responsibility to build a safe and inclusive outdoors where everyone is welcome and feels welcome. The Recreate Responsibly Coalition emerged during the pandemic and has evolved to meet this unique moment. The coalition is built to work collaboratively across the outdoor industry, bringing together advocates, government agencies, and brands in ways like never before. Together, we are emboldening a shared land ethic rooted in equity that seeks to honor Indigenous land and water rights with a sense of stewardship and oneness with our natural surroundings that nurture and enliven us. At the core of Recreate Responsibly messaging is inclusivity and accessibility. We strive to ensure that messaging is simple, succinct, direct, and most of all, inviting. Recreate Responsibly's campaigns are at the heart of the movement. The coalition comes together to streamline important messaging, information, and resources regarding outdoor practices across industries, platforms, and audiences. Each directed form of communication on behalf of the coalition or its members regarding responsible recreation is part of a campaign. The campaigns of the coalition are developed and implemented collaboratively with land management agencies, nonprofits, and outdoor industry leaders. These campaigns are the voices of the coalition and help guide the movement. The current campaigns are Recreating Responsibly in Water, in Winter, with Fire, Off-Road, and today we're going to talk about the Create Responsibly. Go ahead, Tom.
I'm going to get better at unmuting as we get further into this presentation. So I'm basically a Boy Scout at heart, and it's important to me to leave things better than I found them. I grew up hiking, fishing, and camping in Southern Washington and Northern Oregon, and I've realized the only way that I'm going to be able to continue to enjoy these places and to be able to continue filming in those places is if we all work to take care of them. You saw a little bit of that film, The Dark Divide, which we filmed in 65 locations throughout just about every wild place imaginable through a variety of jurisdictions in Oregon and Washington. And one of the biggest challenges I faced on that film was speaking with the gatekeepers for those locations about their reluctance to say yes, because some previous production didn't listen, didn't care about the places they were filming and caused some degree of damage to them or impacted the enjoyment of the other people who were there. So Create Responsibly is about employing simple, green production practices that minimize your impact on our wild spaces and on the other people who'll be using them around you while you work. But it's not just about using our platforms to remind audience, but it's also about using our platforms to remind audiences about the importance of the outdoors to our physical and mental well-being, which is, I think we can all agree, more important than ever now after how many years? 2 years, 10 years of being locked down and having many of these places closed to the public. And if it doesn't harm your story, we would encourage you to include those little reminders about the benefits of the outdoors so that it can get into other people's heads, and that's behavior that they might emulate. And in an era when as a creator, in an era when audiences and the public can easily turn on you, to be frank, even a tiny infraction or error can have major consequences on your future ability to create. And not just for you, for your client, if you have a client you're working for. They're trusting you to create something positive and without incurring liabilities. So one of the things we're trying to keep in mind is how to minimize your exposure when filming in public places. Still me, huh? No, Dusty.
It's me. Sorry, I was on mute. Time in nature and outdoor recreation has proven to be essential for all, especially during uncertain times. All of us, from seasoned outdoor enthusiasts to families heading out to their local park for the first time, can turn to community and simple reminders about how to safely and responsibly recreate outdoors while caring for one another. There is no substitute for nature, but our love for the outdoors can have an impact, especially when poor behavior such as trampling, littering, wildlife disturbance, and visitor crowding or displacement is multiplied by our actions, whether they be purposeful or indirect, such as geotagging, filming in locations with sensitive habitats, which become tourism magnets by adoring fans and others. The Recreate Responsibly Coalition aspires for everyone to have a holistic outdoor experience by advancing all aspects of responsible recreation, keeping yourself, others, and outdoor places safe, accessing outdoor benefits essential to the human experience, and building an inclusive outdoors. The Create Responsibly principles help us reimagine how we engage with the outdoors as content creators and empower us to be supporting stewards. As a federal land management agency, the Forest Service and other federal land management agencies love how people share their experiences and connections to the outdoors, especially when they follow practices that reduce the impact to others and the land while creating an inclusive experience. Content creators have the ability to reach more audiences and inspire all of us to work together as stewards of these landscapes. Go ahead, Tom.
I lied when I said I would get better at unmuting. As someone who is a filmmaker and producer, the last thing I wanted to do as part of this group was to make it even more difficult to mount a production. So the goal here was to create simple to follow best practices that anybody can attain, no matter the size of your crew, and that can be easily shared with that crew. We drafted quite a bit from the original Recreate Responsibly principles and design. So if you haven't taken a look at that, I would encourage you to. They're really great. And in an era when no one's sure about the rules, if many of you are probably familiar with the Supreme Court ruling about filming in national parks, and the fact that those rules can vary vastly from location to location, this is an easy step-by-step guide to lead you to the right person and set you up for success. We also thought it was important for people to know the pain points going into a shoot and not to discover those once you're there. A couple examples from The Dark Divide. That's a movie about a true story about a naturalist named Robert Pyle who took a 6-week trek through the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. It had a lot of campfires and a lot of butterflies. And we discovered on our first day of shooting, you can't build real campfires in many of these locations. So we had to bring in an entire crew to create propane campfires that we hadn't planned on. And we couldn't introduce non-native butterflies into those habitats. So had I had something like this going into that film, it would have made a big difference in terms of my daily sort of headaches on that production. We also wanted to make clear this isn't just for location scouts. Everybody on set should be aware of these guidelines. All it takes is for one hiker to see a crew member chuck a water bottle into the bushes to get your production shut down, which can and will happen. Off to you, Dusty.
I believe Katie is next.
Nope, it's you, Dusty.
All right, great. That's no problem here. Again, the campaigns of the coalition are developed and implemented collaboratively with land management agencies, nonprofits, and outdoor industry leaders. This is true for the Create Responsibly campaign. Within the Recreate Responsibly structure is a federal agency working group who meets monthly to convene land managers who share trends, immediate needs, and priorities. For example, we utilize recreation.gov, your gateway to explore America's outdoor and cultural destinations across the country. On this site, we provide tools and tips to discover new adventures through a one-stop shop for inspiration and ideation, trip planning, information sharing, and reservations to help you dream up your next trip, figure out the details, and reserve experiences at over 4,200 facilities and 113,000 individual sites across the country. Please use recreation.gov to find incredible places and experiences that help you bring home a story. Through recreation.gov, we were able to see visitation trends, demands, and gaps, which we use to shape our messaging. The Federal Working Group also identifies cohesive messaging approaches that are relevant and appropriate for public lands visitors. Finally, the Federal Working Group strives to establish consistency amongst agencies in terms of responsible recreation standards. For example, we are working with the Department of Interior and Congress to try and clarify commercial filming law, regulation, and policy and develop best management practices and standards. Back to you, Tom.
So what are the principles to create content responsibly? You'll see that these look very familiar to the Recreate Responsibly principles. There we go. So some things to know. There's someone responsible for every location. You may have read in the news that you don't need a permit to film in certain national parks. That is not true. You definitely still need to contact somebody and get permission. Permits, even for simple locations, can sometimes take months to process. Every aspect of your shoot needs to be clearly outlined prior. In particular, drones. As more and more of us use drones to film, that can take 90 days or more to get not just park, but FAA approval. And even if you think you're filming in a drone-free zone, if you plan far enough ahead of time, many times you can get permission to an exception to bring in those drones. Remember to check for weathers and hazards ahead of time. That'll prepare you for what to expect. And it's not just about whether or not it's going to rain. Have you marched your crew through Poison Oak like I did 2 weeks ago in Virginia? How about permitting a shoot where a bear has decided to set up shop? That happened on the Dark Divide twice. We filmed in a lava tunnel without getting a soil and air report and ended up having to test our entire crew for lung problems afterwards. There are a million things to take into account. And most times if you make contact with the people responsible for those places, they're going to know what those are. Again, you can avoid some additional cost down the line. To do that, you want to begin with the local Film and Tourism Commission. They're then going to refer you to the land manager directly responsible for the location. And from there, you want to find out who the other stakeholders are. It's not just about getting permits for these places in some instances. For example, on the Dark Divide, we filmed a couple of days on an island out in the Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. We had a permit, but it also turned out that that's a sacred space for the Warm Springs tribe. So we were able to contact them ahead of time, understand some additional things they wanted us to do in order to respect those lands that we wouldn't have been aware of. And that would have been a big issue for us had we gone out there and not taken that into account. And not only that, this is going to help you down the line because every group that has a good experience with your production is going to help share that production, is going to want to see that production down the road. A couple of examples of that are the Yakima and Cowlitz tribes we worked with for the Dark Divide, who became major promotional partners for the film once it was completed. Also, please remember that that place that came up first on your Google search for whatever, amazing vista, is coming up first on everybody else's Google search. So it's going to be the place that has the most people. Take the time to ask around and find places that are just as good, but that only the locals know. 99% of the time, it's going to be even better than what you first found. And the fewer people who use it, the easier it typically is to permit. And terrain isn't just where you've chosen to set up your camera, but how you get in and out. A location that may be fine for somebody in a sedan may swallow up your trailer and grip truck, which I've also had happen. So if you have to go get a bulldozer to pull a truck out, you're going to be very unhappy, and it's always easily avoidable. And getting to that location is just half the story. Is there adequate parking you can prearrange with the location managers? And even a quarter-mile hike to that amazing view you want to film that seems so easy when it was just you and your sneakers can sink even a tiny production when you're hauling dolly track and craft services and just even a handful of things. Nearly every municipality has also cracked down on drone no-fly zones, and the fines are astronomical. If you're somebody who's using a drone regularly, I would encourage you to get your FAA Part 107 license. It takes about a week, and then you can download a free app like Aloft that'll show you the airspace restrictions ahead of time and allow you to instantly obtain access to film. And check as far in advance as you can. Many no-fly zones will be willing to give you a waiver if you do request it in advance. And always remember where you're going to go to the bathroom. This is the number one thing people forget about when shooting in these wild places. And nobody on your crew is going to be okay with going in the bushes, and neither is the Park Service. Remember to bring plenty of water and safety equipment. A crew member will appreciate and guard with their life that $4 reusable water bottle and hip holster with their name on it, and refill it from a large jug instead of taking 2 sips from one of those 800 disposable water bottles you have on set and then dumping them all over the place. And best of all, that'll save you as a producer a ton of money. Please remember that safety equipment is very cheap. You can buy headlamps for $7, which are a lot cheaper than one twisted ankle when a crew member is trying to get back to their car at the end of a shoot. Solar lights are amazing as well, and you can set those up anywhere without any impact on the places you're filming. And one thing I've learned is try to always keep a box with hard hats, rope, and other safety gear around. Even if your crew's not going to use them, they'll appreciate knowing that you care about their well-being. And this applies to COVID as well. I'm in the middle of a documentary right now, and we're shut down because the DP got COVID. So make sure you know basic COVID set safety and have masks, sanitizer, and individually packaged meals. Okay, Katie.
So the next tenet here is build an inclusive outdoors. Inspire others to see themselves in nature, showcase diverse backgrounds, abilities, and the meanings of the outdoors and what it means to get outdoors. And this has really been a backbone for the Recreate Responsibly Coalition from the beginning. There are so many resources out there that tell us kind of the guidelines of leave no trace, don't poop in the outdoors. We have all of these guidelines about the things we can do, but what we really wanted to do was create a better culture, make this a movement and not just a moment or like a single action that we take to clean up after ourselves. So we really want to reach across our communities, and all of that is founded upon this idea of inclusivity. And inclusivity is really what helps us create more robust and healthier cultures. Like many of the other guidelines, this one really seeks to create a ripple effect, right? Like build an inclusive outdoors. What does that really mean? Like what is that as a single action? And that's really not the point here. The point is to shift a mindset. It's like an ongoing commitment that we make in multiple ways, right? So it's to who we represent in our content, what faces, what activities, what bodies, what languages we're showing. It also has to do with, the individuals themselves and the model, the behaviors that we're modeling and the cultures that we're upholding. And this also goes to who we're hiring for our crews. Whether it's hiring a diverse crew and looking at the local places that we're going and getting in contact with boots on the ground there that are already embedded in these issues, that have special knowledge of these places and the sensitivities for an area or a topic or a conversation we're having. So really just being inclusive and widening our circle as much as possible, because the bigger we get, the better we get. We're also looking at the language that we use, considering accessibility, both in terms of our content and making sure that our content itself is accessible, whether that's alt text, image descriptions, font contrast images, as well as the places and the activities that we're showcasing. And of course, to consider the bigger picture, right? We're on public land. We're talking about things that are happening in the outdoors. And here in the United States, public lands are indigenous stolen homelands. And it is irresponsible for us to create content on that land without acknowledging that. And that should become an embedded part of what we do as creators, not an aside, not a quick land acknowledgement, but it's something that we do always. It's part of our culture and part of how we create content. We should be affecting both our personal experiences As creators, this should be changing us, and it should also be changing the people who are seeing and receiving our content. So it kind of goes both ways. We benefit, and the people who are getting our content are benefiting as well. And then the next one is on a similar concept, respect others. And I think that this might feel like, to the folks on this call, a pretty obvious ask, but it's a really critical element of creating a better outdoor culture for us more broadly. And as we look at creators and creation right now, you know, there is certainly some contention and conflict that arises as we are creating or sharing our creations. And so it's just a reminder to be thoughtful, be considerate, think of others, do unto others as you would like to be done unto you, and just minimize your impacts to other people's outdoor experiences. You know, it's the most basic tenet of human decency. Be respectful to others. As creators, it's inevitable that we are going to be disruptive to a space, regardless of whether we love a space, we're shooting something for conservation to help save a place. When we are shooting, we are causing a disruption, both physically with our equipment, our voices, and our crews, and also kind of, I call it like spiritually, you know, we're shifting the vibe of a space. No matter how respectful we are about it, the presence of cameras and microphones or crew and equipment does shift the experience for others as we turn these areas into makeshift production zones. So whether you're operating in selfie mode with just a handheld camera, or you're traveling with a full crew and craft services, you know, we are responsible to acknowledge and minimize the impacts that we have on other outdoor users' experiences. And I do want to read Jillian's quote real quick. She said, "We must at no time, as filmmakers or any creator, lose sight of where we are, nor the impact our work has on local communities and, above all, the natural environment." And I think that that really is such a great way to sum that up, to be respectful. And, you know, I find that even just acknowledging the situation briefly when you're out and you see other people kind of hiking through where you're filming, just saying like, "Hey, thanks so much for like tolerating us, like hanging out here on your beautiful hike. Hope you have a nice day. And let us know if we get in your way or there's anything we can do." You know, just throwing it out there, like creating that moment of humanity and connection. And you might end up with someone who wants to come see your film next time because they saw you shooting it and had such a great experience. Like, let's be the stewards of creating content, and let's make sure that people walk away on their own hike with a positive experience. So just be thoughtful, tread lightly, and remember that everyone deserves a good outdoor experience, whether you're making a movie or just going for an evening walk.
Thanks, Katie. Powerful. Next principle is leave no trace. Respect the land, water, wildlife, and native and local communities. You're going to have an impact on these places, so think through that. Follow the 7 leave no trace principles. I saw that Susanna had a life-changing moment as she learned those 7 principles. So I encourage you to go and learn what those 7 principles are. There's a quick and fun way to do that, learning using hands. And so I encourage you to find that and learn those. Avoid sensitive habitats. You know, there's a lot of plants out there that are very durable to trampling, you know, being walked on multiple times, but there are some that are not. So be aware of where you're walking, where are you putting things down on the ground while you're out there. Consider the impact of disclosing specific locations. You know, we have a lot of fans out there who want to go and see and experience maybe some of the same things that they saw in the film. So be thoughtful about, you know, where am I going? Is this a sensitive place? Is it going to be able to handle increased use because I included it in a film or not? And use your art to educate and showcase responsible use. So while, you know, people are in your film, your production, your art are doing things, you know, are they inspiring others to recreate responsibly in actions that they are doing? You know, are you modeling good outdoor recreation behavior? Next is make it better. Use your art to inspire others to respect and care for these outdoor spaces. You know, depict responsible recreation in action. Provide characters with attributes that tie their work, play, or culture to the outdoors in these landscapes. Create behind-the-scenes content to celebrate your backdrop. and showcase how you use sustainable practices to make your film. One of the best ways for us to learn is from learning from one another. So show and share how you were able to do this. And please continue to help us inspire others to become fellow stewards of our outdoor places. All right, and I'm going to pass it over to Katie again.
So together, all of these tenants create what I like to think of as an ecosystem for a thriving and sustainable creator culture in the outdoors. And we have these, you see this one pager here that we have on our little slide deck. And the original version of Recreate Responsibly, all the editions have one of these postcards. And our original tenants, we printed these out and as postcards, like physical in your hands postcards, and distributed them to tourism boards, to public land visitor centers, for guides who are hosting trips and other folks. And I actually was in Red Lodge, Montana on a Toyota photo shoot and was walking through town and saw in someone's window a local shop. They had the tenants up there. And it's so powerful, I think, to get it out into the world and to take these concepts and like physically put them somewhere. So what we're love to the idea of and would love to see more is like, imagine having these postcards included in crew paperwork, included in your call sheet. This is given out by brands when they're working with ambassadors, and when they ask people to create content for them, they receive this and they say, hey, these are our standards. You need to uphold them. Or they're handed out by someone like Dusty, someone at a public lands management agency who is providing permits for folks who are going to be creating content on public lands. But in the meantime, we're keeping things digital, and we would love for everyone here to get involved with us. So you can sign the pledge. Jeff has it pinned at the top of the chat, the link to sign our pledge, and really just start implementing these philosophies and these concepts and these guidelines into your creation plan and how you think about what you'll be creating and how you edit your creations and how you share things. We are building a resource library, and there have already been some great conversations in the chat about some really collaborative opportunities and great resources. So if you have those, we would love them. We want to make this something that anyone can access and become a better, more respectful creator from. And of course, stay tuned for opportunities. We have been working on this for about a year and a half now, and it has been a really collaborative effort. And the more hands carrying this work, the lighter the load and the larger impact we can have. So we would love to have anyone here involved. So definitely reach out to us about that. And I think the next slide has our email contact and all of that. But what we're going to do now is move into our panel. And before we do, I would love to know, I'll pop this question here in the chat and love to see just a little chatter around it. If any of these tenants particularly resonated with you, or if any of them stuck out to you as a challenge that might be more difficult to implement, we kind of love to get your thoughts and perspectives on this and really make this a conversation. As you can tell, the build an inclusive outdoors and respect others and make it better are the ones that really get me hyped. But we would love to hear from you what gets you stoked and what you want to take away from this panel. So let's jump into the panel discussion. And the first thing we really want to do is circle back on the big why for this campaign and why it's so important. And Tom, you were really kind of one of the first voices bringing Create Responsibly to the table. So I'd love to start with you.
Sure. I think it's twofold. I have encountered so many places where previous people, not just creators, but just everyday outdoors people, have damaged them. How many times have we all gone hiking and a part of the trail's gone because people didn't take care of it? And at the same time, it just seemed like a no-brainer to me, because we could do simple things to protect these places and also make it easier and less expensive for us to film there. And honestly, that's been kind of the core of it for me.
Yeah, that's great. Carrie, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. So folks who are tuning in here, Tom, Dusty, and I are on the Create Responsibly working group together. And Carrie is a kind of fresh perspective to the whole campaign. And I think that I'm really curious to hear what she has to say from the perspective of not having been one of the hands who like is so precious to this. I think Tom, Dustin, I would be like, yeah, this is great and perfect and we love it. But I think Carrie has some really, great perspective to give us from that third party view.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think for me, it's really important, and for a lot of us, is to recognize that we're guests on these lands, and to know when we're guests somewhere, we need to first seek approval and permission before doing anything. And for me, I really have been focusing on how our impacts, not only we have responsibility to the land, but also the community and the people as well. So I think it's important. I really encourage everybody to, which is hard in our industry, because when you're a content creator, you have a schedule, you have a set schedule, you're like, budget's limited, you can't, you're very tight. And I think it's important to build into your schedule, meeting with grassroots activists in that specific area that you're filming in, and local indigenous tribes to be able to really to support them and uplift them. And, the people who live and who are doing the work on the area where you're creating know what's best to it. They've been in this fight forever. So I think it's really important to support them and really encourage everybody to like build that into your shoot schedules too. And yeah, I always just think about the impact, not only on the land, but also the community and the people too, which I think often gets overlooked often. It's easy to overlook, but it's really important to point that out, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Remy said here in the chat that this is a necessary investment for the future. And I couldn't agree more. We have very limited line items on our budget, but that means that we need to be making budgets that include a line item for Indigenous consultations, local community consultations. Like, don't make it a pain point for you later, build for that now. And Dusty, moving over to you, I'm so curious to get your perspective from the land management agency side, and someone who has to deal with all of us creators coming to you for permits and wanting to use the land. So why for you?
Because we need help, honestly. We also have limited budgets and limited capacity, and we would much rather be, using our time and investments to, providing more opportunities. And so anything that we can do to become shareholders, become fellow advocates of sustainable recreation out there, I think it benefits everyone. It benefits not just us as an agency, but it benefits the drinking water sources, where we all get our drinking water. And so it's all connected, right? And so we don't want to be seen as people are here and that we're going to say no, and we're going to create a lot of rules and stuff. No, we want to be partners in the storytelling and the connecting people to the outdoors and to their landscapes, right?
Absolutely. And I do want to say here, Zephyr just added, as we talk about speaking with Indigenous nations and communities before and not as an afterthought, I love this point here, as non-Indigenous filmmakers and creatives, also learning how to hear and respect when people of the land say no. I've definitely encountered more than a few situations where folks don't love to hear the no. They think that they have performed the righteous act of asking, and so now it should just be an automatic yes. But I think it's really important for us, again, like Carrie said, to remember that we are guests, and sometimes we are uninvited, and that's okay. So on this topic, kind of addressing the elephant in the room, right? We are providing solutions here because we have found some challenges, and we have encountered firsthand for a lot of us some pretty big challenges when it comes to public lands and this age of content creation. I know especially in 2020, we all remember the saga with the wildflower poppy fields and creators. Then, we have some very visceral and tangible examples of what's gone wrong. And I think that I'd love to hear from everyone here about some of the solutions that we found to those problems. I know for me, it's, as a creator, I'm an individual creator, so it's a lot of handheld, a lot of selfies. And it's really just embedding these conversations into what I'm talking about. I think for creators in the outdoor space, the era of pretty mountain shot with the wind in my hair is long gone. That is not meaningful content, and nobody needs to consume that. And what I focus on now is sharing beautiful places and stories through a lens of stewardship, community, care, and environmentalism. So team, I see you nodding a lot, Carrie, so I might pop it over to you, or if anyone else has thoughts here.
Sure. Yeah, I think the key that you just like pointed on the key to, and is like collaboration too, with the people. Even, you know, first getting permission, like you said, if they said no, like respect that, and you know, maybe it's just like hire them to share their story too, or you know, go beyond that. But I think it's collaboration. And I think today, in today's age, it's with social media, we're just seeing so much of the parachuting culture too, like coming in and out and leaving. But yeah, again, I think it's important just to really like drive home the point of going beyond that and think about your impact on the community and people too, and really just like trying to connect with them, and share and support them, hire them, invest in them, like do anything you can, and like go back and visit again. Just go beyond like coming in once and leaving. It's important to go back and return, and just really spend time with them too.
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Something else for those of you making fiction content is, if you're making something about a community that you were not born into and grew up in, share that script with members of the community, because 100% of the time you're going to find out they're going to have notes that are going to make what you're doing better and more accurate. And on once you have the script where you want it and you feel like that's in a respectful place, I mean, within like the creative bounds, obviously, of what you're doing, one of the things I've started to do is then partner with local arts organizations to cast locally, and not just cast, particularly for First Nations or Indigenous peoples. Think about casting people into roles that don't call for someone to be First Nations or Indigenous. I think it's incredibly important to take people who don't look like maybe you and put them in roles that are leadership roles, and really change the average person's idea of these like narrow boxes that we all want to fit people into because of what we've seen in our media for our entire lives. One other thing is, we on the Dark Divide, we also 20 of the organizations that we worked with, ranging from environmental organizations to Native American nonprofits, we made them stakeholders in the film. We gave them back end in the film. So, you know, if you're going to go there and you're going to film in someone's home or where their community, why not actually give back to that? I mean, I think that's an incredibly powerful way to create a sense of community and try to undo a little of the damage that's inevitably going to happen when you're exploiting people. And every time you point a camera at someone, to some degree, you're exploiting them because you're using them to fulfill your agenda. So being able to give back to those communities, and also maybe take some of your content and create additional content for them in a way that they can use. I've been doing that a lot lately, and that's an incredibly powerful tool, and it really lets people know that you do care, no matter what you're making. Are you shooting a car commercial? Are you shooting on native lands? There's something you can be doing for those people. It doesn't matter what the content is, large or small.
And I'll add in, one of my favorite quotes is that science is not complete until it's communicated. And we need help communicating the science, you know, the reasoning behind why some areas are more sensitive than others. What are the impacts to wildlife, as well as the social impacts to crowding and displacement of visitors? When we're teaching our new wilderness rangers how to approach someone who's obviously, you know, violating some sort of rule, is not to like bring up the rule as a reason why they're being approached, but to come at it from an education stance. You know, use what we call the authority of the resource for explaining like why we need to perhaps correct a behavior so that it is more sustainable, so there is more experiences like you're having right now for others after you. So helping us communicate the science is something that's really critical. And I love that, Tom. You know, again, we don't have the resources to do film productions locally, but if there's a photograph or something like that that is eye-catching that can help us communicate that science, please, I would love that for sure.
I love that, Dusty. And so this is kind of a continuation of the conversation that we're already pretty deep in, looking at, how specifically each of us have addressed these challenges and the barriers, and as people who want to create, and how we can offer folks who do want to create responsibly, but may not have the resources or may not know how to get involved. Because I think part of what makes Create Responsibly so wonderful is that it's not talking about what we're against. We're not trying to police anyone on how they're behaving on public lands. We're not trying to call anybody out and make them feel bad. We're providing an opportunity and an invitation. We're not saying, no, don't do that. We're saying, hey, come do this. And I think that when you frame it as an invitation, that's where you create that space for growth, is where you create a space for collaboration and community and trust. Any relationship needs to have reciprocity. And so if you are inviting people to come in and be part of something, you're going to have a much more impactful movement. So I'd love to hear from you all thoughts on some of those ways that we can break those barriers down. And Dusty, particularly, I think we're going to start with Tom, but I want to hear Dusty's thoughts as someone who is, the guy making the rules, right? And kind of dishing out the permits, right? But Tom, let's start with you first from the creator perspective.
Oh, I was just going to build on what you said, Katie, in that one of the really amazing things is every crew member that you instill this in, and when they see how much better the shoot goes and how much more pleasant it is, how much better the content is, they're going to then go off onto other productions and they're going to instill some of that with them. So it really can spread surprisingly quickly among people. So that's one of the things that I find really exciting about this. Every one of you that joins, that growth is exponential, because every crew member you work with is then going to work with one other person or 5 other people or 100 other people and bring some of that with them.
Thanks, Kitty and Tom. Yeah, there are barriers. We'll acknowledge that. One of the areas that I work in is with designated wilderness areas. These are areas that Congress have set aside for the strongest level of land protection that there is. And so there are some things that we are limited by as far as what we can approve to take place within designated wilderness areas, such as landing of aircraft, including drones, things like that. We have to go through what's called I'm not going to get into it, minimum requirement analysis before we can improve things like that. So there are barriers that we have to work through. But please know it is our intention to get to yes. And so we may be asking you questions as we work through the permitting process that are kind of weird and frustrating and might take some time, some homework to take back and work on. But we're trying to get to yes, again, because we want to be inspired by your art, and we want others to be inspired to do the work that we do. I mean, many of us are in this career because of the art that we saw, the films that we saw that drew us into the outdoors, things like that. So yeah, patience goes a long ways. But again, we're continuing to work with Congress and others on trying to make, commercial film permitting easier to understand. How can we have some best management practices? Tools like these principles are definitely going to help us out a long way. But definitely, there's legislation that can be worked on and other advocacy that can for sure happen, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of what we're coming away from this with, what we keep saying without saying it, is that the solution is being more proactive. I think as creators, we're often so reactive, and it sounds like we need to spend a little bit more time on the front end, giving ourselves space and time for getting everything, all the ducks in a row, and also making those investments in with our budgets and with how much we are allocating where to solve these issues before they become issues, and to give ourselves space and time to not get frustrated by, a bazillion questions on a permitting process, because it's part of the process. This is part of what we signed up for. This is part of what we allegedly love to do. So I think giving ourselves more space and time to do it will set everyone up for better success. And Carrie, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to add to this for creators?
I was just going to add on the back end too, like it's so easy just to go into a place and leave, but I think it's important to continue to support and show up when you're done creating that content as well. So just wanted to add that too. And it could be showing up, can be like investing or financially, or even your time, just going back and really supporting the local communities.
Yeah, your microphone's going on and off, it looks like.
For those of you not following the chat, Katie's going to jump off and back in. Dusty, I love what you said from your perspective, because I think it's easy when you're on dealing with the tyranny of the schedule and budget to forget that the people who you need to say yes, they're on your side. They love these places. Their goal is to get to a yes. And if they're asking questions, that's the point. I mean, I have yet to meet anybody wearing a uniform who didn't do that job because they love those places and want to share those places and want people to enjoy them, and they want them to exist for future generations. And I think as a creator, it can be easy to have that like myopia that happens and just try to barrel your way through. But it's pretty rare, honestly, that works. And I assume we're all doing this because we love it. And if it was just about making a paycheck, we would have all gone to dental school or something. So try to remember that this is supposed to be a good experience for everybody. And I know for me, that's the hardest thing to remember when like it's going to rain in 20 minutes and I have somebody that doesn't want to unlock a gate because this is like someplace I'm not supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fair point too. You know, it's easy for me to say be proactive and prepare to spend more money, but also being realistic about the fact that, like, yes, it will be a challenge, and it will be difficult sometimes, but it's part of the process. Yeah. So I want to talk about some stories or some scenarios that have kind of inspired each of these panelists and myself to create responsibly, and how we've used our platforms to inspire others. And something that really sticks out for me is thinking about the work that I did with Emory County in Utah. It's a very rural town, or very rural county in Utah. It's a transitioning from very old school legacy oil and gas economy to an outdoor recreation economy. And I got to be part of some really wonderful storytelling that went around about, you know, just the brand and the community, and being able to be so embedded with the local community and local voices, and balancing that with the land itself. Emory County is my favorite place in the world, which is why I became part of this project. And just seeing the difference that it makes when you are respectful and thoughtful and engaged with local communities. You know, this was a place that was so adverse to having their community showcased online and stories told about them. But after 2 years of working with them, it was supposed to be a 6-month contract, ended up being 2 years. And we ended up in a place where people are proud of the way that Emory County is represented and the content and the stories that are told about that place. And it's probably my proudest work that I've done, because again, it was intentional, slow, collaborative, inclusive, respectful, and just joyous, which I think is another really important part of all this, right? Like, we have to be joyous and have fun, and be creative with all of this work that we do. So I'm curious if any of you have other stories that you'd like to share.
There were a couple messages about Rimi, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, asked a question. Is it okay if we jump in and answer that? So Rimi asks, let's go back up there. What if somebody buys your content and then says, well, you know, cost, et cetera, no deal, sorry. Basically, I think what you're asking is, if you sell your content to someone and then they renege on the commitment to follow those rules. I mean, that's something you have to take into account ahead of time, and either have whatever that give back component be a part of your deal, which is something that Michael Moore is really good about. In a lot of his films, it's part of the agreement that, like, whatever union he's covering has to get a part of the gross receipts from that film. Or you have to try to do things on your own. You can only control what other people do so much, right? So I think it's about setting things in place and building those relationships ahead of time, so that no matter what happens, you can be a part of making that a good experience for the community, which can be a lot about the development of a project, which doesn't really cost you anything other than maybe some additional time that chances are is going to save you a lot of time down the road. My opinion.
That's great, Jesse, or Tom. And we are getting close to the top of the hour here now. I do want to specifically ask you, Carrie, if you could share some of your experiences with your film and the creating responsibly through that. I think you had some really beautiful things to share about community and the work that you've done there. So just tell us a little bit about the film and why it was so close to your heart.
Yeah, well, I think piggybacking off of your experience with your project too is just really slowing down, having a project that's really collaborative too in every sense of the way, and just spending time in the community with the camera and then without the camera too, and just really becoming a member of the community, going in with an open mind and being humble and being prioritizing, listening, learning, and supporting too, like anything that they need support with too. And yeah, I mean, that's what I've been doing work with the Gwich'in Nation for about 5-6 years now, first with through Patagonia and a photo essay on protecting the Gwich'in way of life in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and then have been continuing to go back and just doing work with that community and with other Alaska Native tribes. So for me, it's important for my work just to continue to go back and just create content in a collaborative way, in an authentic way, but also give back with whatever they need help with too. Like during the pandemic, I ended up doing senior portraits for a lot of the villages because they couldn't travel to Fairbanks. So they sent me to go to like different villages. So use your skills. Like everybody has a skill to use, like use that to collaborate and be a good member of the community.
I love that, Carrie. And it reminds me of this idea of, it kind of reminds me of like mutual aid almost, and just the idea of being in service. We are not just in service to our films, our cameras. We're not just in service to like the work that we're doing. We're in service to the story. We are stewards of these stories, and and part of the story is the community, the physical landscape. There's so much that we can be in service to through the process of creating and storytelling. And I think that that's like so beautiful. Who wouldn't want to be part of that, right? So as we're wrapping up here, I'd love to hear just a next step, a solution, or an idea from everyone, and like what you would love folks to take away from this. And for me, I'd love to share an idea that was introduced to me by the organization Indigenous Women Hike, who have been advocating for, so I'm, again, an individual creator mostly. I do a lot of like sponsored content and trips to specific places to tell the story of those lands. And what that organization has suggested is that every time an influencer or creator goes to a place and is essentially benefiting and profiting off of that place, that you should look up the First Nations, the Indigenous community of that place, and donate a portion of the money that you are making back to them. Just kind of like, again, building that in as a line item. You know that you are going to give back 10%, charge an extra 10%. As individuals, you are allowed to negotiate that number up to be able to give back more. So do that. And I'm curious what y'all think as well.
Absolutely. That's what we did on the Dark Divide. I think we allocated like 20% of the back end for these various organizations. And again, it's about leaving things better than you found it, right? You want people to look at what you've done, or at least I do, as a positive experience that somehow enrich their lives. And it's so rare, especially in this day and age. I think the more we read the news, the more we starts to feel like, look at this last week, like that people are less and less a part of a larger community. And I think the most important thing for me to remember every day when I'm like writing a check is, who it benefits the most is me. It makes me feel better about what I'm doing. It is hopefully me doing my part to help undo some of the things past generations have done. And it's never going to be enough. So you're never going to help these communities too much. And what's that dumb saying? Like when you give something, it helps the giver as much as the recipient. It's if you're in this session, you're probably trying to make the world a better place. And that doesn't happen in big steps. That happens in one step at a time.
I was just going to add too, if you're like a bigger crew, like a feature film like Tom does, I think it's important to hire local people too, not just bring in all the crew in, but I think it's really important to hire in local communities.
Yeah, and Dusty, oh, you go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I was just going to say, and if you have the ability to hire people and train them up so that they can move up in positions, I think that's incredibly important. Everybody wants to show up and hire local PAs, but nobody's going to be able to build a life on that and build something sustainable unless they can become a production coordinator or go from being a second AC to a first AC, or go, become a location manager or location scout. I think it's really great to include teaching as a part of what you're doing. And I can guarantee you, no matter where you are, unless it's the middle of the Mojave Desert, there's going to be an organization there that's trying to do the same thing, that would love to partner with you and give you smart people who are just eager to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Mojave also has advocates. And so Dusty, my last question to you here now is, like, how can we help us help you? What can we do as creators from the land management agency side? Like, what is one thing you would love for us to leave with?
Well, I really wanted to close out with saying, thank you. But my message is, please continue to do the work that you're doing. It's so important. It broadens our worldview. It helps us understand other people's perspectives that maybe we didn't get that input as we were developing as human beings. So thank you for being inspiring, for telling us stories, for expanding our knowledge of these great places. And so, yes, please don't give up. Keep doing it. Work through those and share your successes. Help this community become better and stronger. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and folks, you heard that straight from the mouth of the U.S. Forest Service. This is all collaboration. This is all collaboration, and we all want to experience these stories too. Like, we all love watching these films. And once we wrap up here, we will be playing the trailer for Carrie's film. So please make sure to stick around and watch that. I'm really excited to watch it as well. And just to close us out here, there's some really good work to be done. And I think that there's some really great energy around doing this great collaborative work and creating a better culture for creators in the outdoors and like beyond, for all creators, no matter where we're creating. And so if you are on this call and you're stoked, again, we would love to encourage you to please take the Create Responsibly pledge, join us, get involved. I'll drop my email in the chat here. And we just love to hear from you. We'd love to get your perspective, see what challenges you're facing and how we can help provide solutions to that, because that's what it's all about, is about solutions and coalition building. And of course, here we have to say thank you to Hollywood Climate Summit and Impact for inviting us to be part of this and for giving us a space to nerd out about creating responsibly for the last hour. And just, we'd love to hear from you. Let's get involved. And if anyone else here has a closing statement, let her rip.
Land back. Thank you.
Where do we get one of those shirts, Carrie?
They're the Thrive. It's a company called Thrive, an Indigenous-owned clothing company.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And Dusty, if you want to let that trailer rip, I think we're ready to watch.
Sounds good. Did we want Carrie to introduce it real quick?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this is, so it's a short film directed by Maya Wickler. I was the director of photography and co-producer on it. And it's the following Quanah Chasing Horse, who, and her mother, Jody Potts Joseph, who are land protectors. They're Hongwichin. And we started filming right before the pandemic, and we were supposed to be done, but then Quanah's career took off. So we ended up following it, and, through her power of Indigenous representation in the fashion world, and to become a supermodel that she is now, and all her advocacy and land protection work.
That's what they did it.
Growing up, I wanted to be a model so bad. But walking two worlds is hard.
Me and Onej came here to fight for our Arctic refuge, our animals, permanent protection for our native lands.
There have been multiple generations of people fighting to protect our caribou, our culture, and way of life.
I'm so far away from everything that I know. If you want to know who I am, you have to acknowledge where I come from.
Wow. Chills. Thank you so much for sharing that, Carrie. And where can we, if we want to see the film, tell us more about that, how we can follow along with this.
Yeah, so it was presented by the North Face. So right now we're trying to figure out it premiered at Tribeca a couple weeks ago, and now we're doing the film festival circuit, and coming up with, we're going to be doing community and impact screenings as well. And then we'll keep everybody posted when it goes online. But those are the main focuses right now. I actually think you can, Tribeca's host, you can still watch it on Tribeca virtually until tomorrow. Yeah, but it'll come out soon.
Awesome. I think I speak on behalf of all the panelists and everyone watching here that we can't wait to see the full film. It looks beautiful. And thank you for sharing that with us. So folks, I think with that, we are wrapping it up. Thank you so much for staying with us as we topped the hour here and continue to push past it. We really appreciate everyone for joining us and taking some time out of your Saturday. And I hope that you all have a wonderful day and continue to learn and get some rest.
Thank you so much.